Hey everyone, so about half a year ago, I wrote a Percy Jackson fan fiction short story called Percy Jackson Bender of Blood that explores what would happen in the Percy Jackson world if Percy found out that he could bloodbend. And we kind of got to see some of Dark Percy when he controlled poison in the pit of Tartarus in the House of Hades book, but my story explores Dark Percy even more than that. And I got a lot of good reception on it. Some people wanted me to write a sequel. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to write a sequel up until now, but one of my subscribers wanted to write a sequel, so she did it. And so that's essentially what this video is going to be about today. I'm going to read the sequel to my original fan fiction that one of my subscribers wrote. And by the way, both of these short stories fit perfectly into the Percy Jackson world. They don't retcon or change anything. In fact, they even reference things that happened in Percy Jackson books. So the name of this second fan fiction is Blood Runs Thicker Than Water. And once again, this is a sequel to my original short story that I wrote by myself called Percy Jackson Bender of Blood. And so this second short story was written by one of my subscribers named VC_tunes. That's her username. Her real name is Vaidehi Chowdhury. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that. I don't know how to pronounce. I'm sorry. For the rest of this video, I'm just going to call her VC. So VC wrote this short story as a sequel to my original story, but I will say I did heavy revisions to this second short story. I was like the co-author / reviser to this second short story. I kind of made the story more in Percy's voice, and like kind of changed some of the smaller plot points, added some details, stuff like that. So VC is the original author of this second short story, but like I said, I just did a lot of editing to the story. And the cover picture for this second short story, as well as actually the first one that I wrote, both of them were made by one of my subscribers as well, named Ghost Queen 12, and I don't know her real name, so that's all you get. Oh, and by the way, I am using this very cheap microphone for this video to hopefully block out some of the background sound, unlike the last time when I read my first short story. We'll see how it goes. But like I said, this is probably the cheapest microphone I could buy on the internet, so I don't know how the quality is going to be. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get into this second short story. I feel like I probably shouldn't have to say this, but if you have not read the original fan fiction that I wrote by myself, it's linked in the description. Read that one first and then come back to this one and read this one, because you're going to have to know what happened in the first one to understand what happens in this one. But it's okay because I've linked both of the stories in the description to this video, so you can either listen to me read it or you can just go read both of them for yourself. I've also linked the first video where I read my first short story, Percy Jackson Bender of Blood, in the comment section, so you can go listen to that one if you want to. Okay, and I know you hate waiting a little bit more, but I do have to read a disclaimer that VC wrote for the short story before we start, just to make, just for legal purposes, need a disclaimer. So this is in VC's voice, by the way. I'm not reading this as myself. I'm reading this as VC. I do not own Percy Jackson, and neither does the Percy Jackson dude. But he did write his first fan fiction in a way that it fits into the canonical Percy Jackson universe. He wanted to explore the possibility of Percy bloodbending because blood is mostly made of water. I think his fan fiction is amazing. Definitely read that one first because this is a sequel. I wanted to explore what could happen after the original story, so I wrote this story with the help of the Percy Jackson dude. I hope you guys like it. And now, let us dive into the story that is Blood Runs Thicker Than Water. Look, I didn't want to be a bloodbender. As a demigod son of Poseidon, water is always my go-to liquid of choice. But on one dreadful day, in a time of great need for me, water chose to be a bad friend and leave me hanging. Annabeth and I had been attending New Rome University for 2.5 years. And honestly, things had been too peaceful. She and I were both used to monsters knocking on our doors with the intent to kill us every other day, so not having that happen was really weird. I'm not saying I wanted it to happen, but a monster here and there definitely wouldn't have hurt things. Anyway, it was finally winter break, and Annabeth suggested we take a day trip before each of us headed home to be with our families for the rest of our time off. She tended to have good ideas like that once in a while. A large part of me was excited to get an early start away from the educational horribleness of NRU, but a smaller part of me was just hoping I could find an easy monster to pick a fight with. New Rome was way too safe. I'd been starved of action for way too long. I was pretty eager to hear a monster threaten to eat me so I could lop its head off. Annabeth and I chose to go to Diablo Ridge, a chain of mountains near the Berkeley Hills, not too far away from New Rome. And when I say Annabeth and I chose to go there, I mean Annabeth chose to go there. I'd learned pretty early on in our relationship to not fight her on stuff like this. Once she set her mind on something, it was hard to go against it. We called a taxi from within the monster-protected boundaries of New Rome, and an hour and a half later, at about midday, we stood in front of the range. The line of mountains rose in jagged sun-scorched layers, dry rock, sharp cliffs, and narrow trails that looked like they were designed to break people's ankles. A brisk wind cut through the mountains with an eerie whistle. Annabeth nudged me as we took in the sight. So, what do you think? I glanced around, smiling. Looks like a good place to walk into danger. Her eyebrows narrowed. What? Oh, nothing. Annabeth gave a small amused huff. She wasn't aware of my intention to try to have some monster fun today. Maybe I should have told her, but that probably would have just made her worried. It does look like a pretty crazy hike, though, I said, raising a hand to my eyes to block the bright sun. Even though there were no clouds out today, it wasn't too hot, being the middle of winter and all. I was really glad we hadn't tried doing this in the summer. We probably would have died from heat stroke just standing here. Annabeth scanned the ridge lines as if she were reading a blueprint because architects are weird like that. She said, Seaweed Brain, if you think it's tough just looking at it, just wait until we actually get on a trail. Hey, you're the one who decided we should come here. Annabeth put on a super cute grin. Just kidding, we faced way worse things than this. Don't tell me you're afraid of walking around a few cliffs. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. Well, we haven't exactly had the best history with cliffs. Annabeth's expression softened. We're not in Tartarus anymore, and we'll never have to go back there. We'll be fine. Come on. She took my hand and led me onto a trail. After a few hours, I was completely exhausted, and Annabeth didn't seem to be in much better shape. We'd passed only a couple other hikers along the way, who'd both stared at Annabeth and me as if we were idiots, probably because we were hiking a treacherous mountain without any gear, and somehow neither of us had remembered to bring water. Yeah, we were definitely idiots. Hydration is pretty key when doing physical stuff. We came across a flat boulder beside the trail and dropped onto it without a word to each other. I wondered how on earth I had let Annabeth bring me on this trek of torture. Annabeth surveyed the area and I followed suit. We were a lot higher than I'd thought. We were also very far from where we'd started, which I wasn't thrilled about. Look how far we've come, Percy, Annabeth said, brushing some strands of her blonde hair over one shoulder. I used to think we wouldn't even make it past the age of 16. We've been through so much, and now we finally get to live and just be together. It was true. Annabeth and I had literally been to hell and back multiple times. I was pretty sure I'd have died more than once if she hadn't been by my side ever since I found out I was a demigod. I looked at her and said, All thanks to you, wise girl. I'd almost forgotten my side quest of finding a monster to fight today, but to be honest, I was okay with not pursuing it. I was way too tired for that now. Maybe I'd catch one when I went back to Manhattan in a few days to visit my mom, stepdad, and little sister. I was about to suggest that Annabeth and I head back down the trail when I felt something odd, almost as if the air had grown 1 degree cooler. Sometimes, as a demigod, you just have a sensation when things are about to go wildly wrong. I should have expected something like this would happen right after I'd sworn off monsters for the day. The wind stopped blowing. Everything became silent. I know it's cliche to say you could hear a pin drop, but you could hear a pin drop. It was that quiet. I stood up and stepped forward, realizing for the first time that we were pretty close to the edge of a cliff. I stopped just shy of the edge. Great. Nothing says fun trip like a suspiciously quiet mountain. Annabeth stood up as well and started walking gingerly over to me, keeping her eyes on the ground. Percy, I think there's something beneath us. Too late, I noticed she was right. I could feel a slight soundless vibration under my shoes. Okay, stay calm, I said, because when stuff like this happens, you have to act like you have everything under control. Between Annabeth and me, the ground cracked and exploded 5 feet wide as a draken burst through the rock in a storm of heat. Annabeth and I apparently had the same instincts. We both saw that the draken was headed one way, and we leaped the other. What the heck? Annabeth yelled. Actually, that's not what she said, but I can't tell you what really came out of her mouth because it was very unladylike. Also, her yelling didn't exactly help because the draken heard her and turned around. It fixed its glowing red eyes on us. The last draken I'd faced in the Battle of Manhattan years ago had been able to paralyze people with just a glance. Luckily, this draken didn't seem to be able to do that, considering I was staring right into its ugly eyes. In addition to its bright eyes, the draken had scaly green reptilian skin, sharp fangs, and radiated warmth like nobody's business. It was basically just a giant lizard with no arms. That's a pretty good and easy way to picture it. Oh, and did I mention it was ugly? Why did this have to happen? First, I'd wanted to find a monster today, then I hadn't, and then this freak of nature had shown up, almost as if to punish me for flip flopping. In terms of monsters, this was one of the worst. Why couldn't it have been a Drakena? Drakene are super easy to kill. Bottom line, we were in serious danger. So, I did one of the only things that came naturally to me in a fight. I extended my senses to search for nearby water. If any water was even remotely close to us, I would have known about it instantly. But I came up empty. That's new, I muttered. So far, the Draken wasn't actually doing anything except keeping its beady eyes on us. But come on, it was a Draken. Drakens eat people. It would decide to pounce on us sooner or later. Annabeth, tell me if the Draken moves, I said. Annabeth started to protest, but probably understood what I was trying to do, so she stopped. I closed my eyes and attempted to search for water again, harder this time, imagining that I could force all the world's oceans to wrap around me like a cocoon. Somehow that still didn't work. No familiar tug in my gut. All I could feel was dry air and a sense of dread. It's moving, Annabeth yelled, and tackled me sideways right as the Draken passed through open air where I'd just been. We landed hard on the rocky ground, but quickly got to our feet and started running down the trail. Do you have your sword? I asked Annabeth, even though I knew the answer. She didn't have it, which was weird because she brought it everywhere. Annabeth didn't even bother answering my question. I also considered asking her if she'd brought her Yankees cap that could make her turn invisible, but I knew the answer to that too. I patted my pocket as I ran, sighing with relief as I felt my ballpoint pen. It was always there. If it came to it, I could take out the pen and turn it into my wicked double-edged sword, Riptide. But we weren't at that point yet. I wasn't really sure if we could outrun this monstrosity, but I also wasn't sure we could beat it with just one weapon between the two of us. The Draken roared behind us, and we sped on. Annabeth was ahead of me now, leading me through angles and turns like she'd already mapped out 3 ways we could die and picked the least annoying one. I followed her because honestly, she's usually right, and also stopping meant becoming Draken food. My back started to warm up, and I realized the Draken was almost upon us, radiating a field of pure heat. Left! Annabeth called from right in front of me. I was already going left, I snapped, mostly because it was true, but also because I needed something to say that wasn't, we're completely screwed. We kept scrambling down the slope and entered a section of the trail that had sheer cliffs on either side. The Draken followed us in and began to tear enormous chunks from the ridge with its teeth, flinging them toward us. Oh, cool. So now it knew how to throw deadly projectiles. One massive jagged boulder slammed down just ahead of us, blocking the path forward. Another crashed behind us, sealing off the way back. We stopped, panting hard and trapped in an area about 20 feet both ways. We probably could have tried climbing the boulders to get out of here, but I figured our Draken friend wouldn't let that happen. As if on cue, the Draken's head appeared on top of the boulder behind us as it began slithering over. I reached into my pocket and removed my ballpoint pen, then took off the cap and threw it to the ground. The pen instantly grew into a 3-foot long blade of shiny celestial bronze. I pointed it at the Draken as Annabeth moved behind me. Amazingly enough, the Draken wavered a bit at the sight of the sword. I took that as a small win and tried to capitalize, using my senses to reach out for water again. And even though I felt like I was concentrating as hard as I could, I still felt nothing around me. Why isn't this working? Why can't I sense any water? Annabeth kept her eyes on the Draken. Everything around here is dry. You're trying to find something that isn't there. The nearest water is miles away. I frowned. This had never happened to me before. In all my time fighting monsters, there had always been at least a small water source nearby that I could draw from if I wanted to. So that means I can't use my powers right now? Nice deduction, seaweed brain. Did that take long for you to figure out? Annabeth asked, still looking at the Draken. She probably didn't mean for that to sound harsh, but it kind of did. However, she and I were both about to be killed, so if she wanted to be a little sharp with me, I didn't have a problem with it. Maybe we would joke about it in the underworld after this. The Draken snarled and moved closer. I thrust my blade toward it, and the creature backed up a little bit. We need another plan, Annabeth whispered. Any ideas? I thought ideas were your thing. Annabeth's face was ghostly white. I'm fresh out. Great. So my girlfriend, who is a daughter of Athena, didn't have a plan. I was pretty sure she was the first child of the wisdom goddess in the history of the world to not have a plan. I racked my brain trying to think of a way out of this, and pretty quickly remembered what had happened this past summer, right before the start of the school year. Basically, Annabeth had wanted to do a little science experiment with my powers. Since blood is mostly water, she'd wanted to see if I could control it. Because that's a totally normal thing to wonder about. The good news was, it had worked. The bad news was, it had worked. I had felt like I held people's lives in the palm of my hand and could end them with barely a thought, just by telling their blood what to do. In fact, I'd almost killed Annabeth before she'd snapped me out of the dark spell I was in and convinced me to never bloodbend again. I hadn't told her this because she would have freaked out, but I'd been secretly planning to give bloodbending another attempt, just to see if something had gone wrong the first time, so maybe I could fix it. If I could master bloodbending and not lose myself to darkness, I'd be unstoppable. But I hadn't been away from Annabeth since the first time, so I hadn't had a good chance to try again. The next time I tried to control blood, I didn't want any humans to be anywhere close to me. I heard a crash, jolting me out of my thoughts. The draken had dropped down into our rock jail cell. It seemed that the creature no longer cared about my sword. It had us cornered, and it knew it. It was only a matter of time before we became its lunch. As if reading the thoughts I'd just had, Annabeth gripped my shoulders from behind and said, "Maybe there is something. Percy, you can control more than just water. I know we agreed you'd never do it again, but there's no other way." Something heavy settled in my chest. I knew she was right, but it was still risky. "Annabeth, you know what happened last time. I almost killed you." "I'm aware, but we're going to die anyway. What's the harm?" I still wasn't confident. "We have no other choice," Annabeth cried desperately as the draken inched closer to us. At this point, the monster was just having fun. It could have killed us already. The sick creature probably enjoyed watching us cower. I was about to protest again, but then the draken lashed out with a long, spindly pink tongue, wrapping it around Annabeth's leg, and dragged her away from me faster than I could react. She screamed as she clawed at the jagged ground. Dust filled the air, the heat emanating from the draken spiked. As I looked at Annabeth flailing, I realized I didn't care about safety anymore. I didn't care what had happened this past summer. I didn't care that I didn't know a single thing about how to keep the darkness at bay if I tried to control blood. All I saw was Annabeth in danger, and I couldn't have that. "Hold on, wise girl!" I yelled. I darted forward, somehow going faster than the speed of the draken's rapidly retracting tongue, and slashed Riptide straight through it. Golden ichor poured from the dragon's tongue stump and started pooling on the ground as the monster wailed in agony. Annabeth quickly stood up and removed the severed end of the tongue from her ankle. "Now, Percy!" Annabeth screamed, but I didn't need her to prompt me. I hadn't really expected to see ichor, the blood of immortals, but surely it wasn't that much different from regular mortal blood. I reached my senses out to the dragon's tongue stump, and I was instantly in the bloodbending zone. The ichor contained 52.674885% water. Don't ask me how I knew that. It was less water content than human blood, but still easily enough for me to latch onto. I could feel all the draken's blood vessels, each one undulating with the ichor pulsing through it. Without wasting any more time, I commanded every single ounce of it to expel outward through the most convenient exit point. The draken groaned in pain. Golden blood gushed from its mouth, eyes, and nose. I smiled. I might have even laughed. The draken stumbled around the space for a few moments, super discombobulated and still howling. So much blood had come out of the monster's body that it was starting to pool up around my shoes. Finally, with one last cry of pain, the draken collapsed to the ground, splashing ichor in every direction. I looked down at my blood-soaked shoes and socks. The ichor looked so enticing. My enemy was terminated, but that wasn't enough for me. This current command I held over life and death felt so freeing. Why wasn't I bloodbending all the time? Why did I ever have to turn this ability off? Last time I'd only controlled a few drops of human blood, but this time I'd controlled hundreds of gallons of immortal ichor with ease. I felt like a god, and why shouldn't I be? I expanded my senses in every direction, and this time they didn't disappoint me like they had earlier. I immediately felt the water in the blood of millions of bodies around me. Some were only several miles away, others hundreds of miles. The blood vessels of humans and monsters alike waited for my command. What should I do? Would it be wrong to kill all these creatures? No. Most of them had probably led wicked lives. I'd be doing the world a justice by disposing of these countless evil souls. I raised my arms, my sword still clasped in my right hand, and took a deep breath. The enormous smile that had been on my face for the past minute somehow grew larger. Percy, no! I heard from off in the distance. The voice was so loud. Stop! This wasn't supposed to happen! The dragon is dead! We're safe! Stop! Who was that? Oh, yes, Annabeth, my girlfriend. Somehow, in my bloodbending indulgence, I'd forgotten that there was a sack of veins and arteries standing right next to me, primed to explode if I told them to. I would do to her exactly what I'd just done to the draken, and I'd enjoy seeing it just as much. Vaguely, I realized that Annabeth was standing in front of me, shaking my shoulders. She'd done this exact same thing the last time I'd controlled blood. Did she really think she could break me out of this again? She was the one who'd convinced me to bloodbend both times. I was only doing what she wanted, and yet for some reason, she had the audacity to ask me to stop again. I allowed myself to focus on Annabeth, not because I was giving in to her wishes, but because I wanted to watch her beg for mercy. Tears streaked down her dust covered face. Percy, please. This isn't you and you know it. You don't want to hurt anyone. You're a good person and always have been. Gods and monsters have tried to manipulate you before, but you've always fought back. You've always chosen to be a hero. Think of your family. Think of NRU. Think of our future together. I love you so much, Seaweed Brain. I wanted to tell her I didn't love her back. I probably should have killed her already. But something small in the back of my mind told me that I'd regret it if I did. And somehow, that was all it took. My senses contracted back into my body with a silent snap. My sword fell out of my suddenly limp hand and clattered to the rocks. I could no longer feel the blood of millions around me. Annabeth must have sensed something had changed because she wrapped me up in a tight hug. I slowly hugged her back, and some tears escaped my eyes. We stood there for at least 5 minutes, not saying a word. Finally, Annabeth stammered, I I'm so sorry. I I'll never ask you to do that again. For real this time, even if we get into another deadly situation. And unlike when she'd said that during my past bloodbending foray, I actually agreed with her sentiment. The things I'd just experienced, I didn't ever want to feel that way again. If the first time had been bad, this had been extremely, completely, absolutely bad. It wasn't worth it to ever try again in the future. I gently separated myself from Annabeth and held her at arm's length, looking deep into her stormy gray eyes. I'm so sorry too, and thanks for helping me through that. I couldn't have done it without you. It was way harder this time to not give in to the darkness. Do you want to talk about it? Yeah, but first, let's get out of this nasty pit. Annabeth and I climbed over one of the boulders and continued hiking down the trail, but we didn't speak for a while, which was good for me because I needed to collect my thoughts. When I gauged that we were about halfway to the bottom of the slope, I told Annabeth the whole story: what I'd sensed, what I'd felt, what I'd thought, how I'd wanted to kill millions, how I'd wanted to kill her. That last part was really hard to admit. Why does this happen? I asked after finishing my story. Why does blood have such an evil effect on me when I try to control it? Maybe it's because blood runs thicker than water, Annabeth said. Water is basic, but blood is much more than that. It's like you said, you felt like you had command over countless lives not that long ago. That kind of power corrupts people. So each time you do it, you automatically crave it even more. I kicked a rock on the trail. I guess that makes sense. But listen for a second. Annabeth reached out and grabbed my arm, halting our descent. This isn't entirely your fault. I'm the one who first asked you to try bloodbending. I'm glad that it led you to saving our lives today, but I think this has taught us that some things really aren't meant to be controlled. Let's just make sure in the future to not go anywhere without preparing first. That way, we won't have to rely on this power that always ends up threatening to destroy you and those close to you. No complaints from me, I said. putting on a smile for Annabeth's sake. I'm officially swearing off bloodbending forever. Annabeth allowed herself to smile back. She reached out and took my hand. A few minutes later, we arrived at the bottom of the mountain. I glanced at Annabeth. For our next trip, we should probably go to a place near the ocean. I'd even settle for a lake. Annabeth gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Sounds perfect to me. With our hands still locked tight, she and I walked toward the nearby road, and I didn't dare look back. All right, guys, that is the end of the story. I hope this mic held up for the entire video because I don't know, it's kind of questionable, but hopefully it did. Hopefully the audio was okay in this video. But yeah, guys, that's the entire fan fiction. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully you read the first one before this one, so this one actually made sense. But guys, definitely get in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on the story, on the writing, everything about the story. Get in the comments right now. And I did just want to talk about really fast. Kind of the message of this story, like the one in my first story, is that some things aren't meant to be controlled. You know, it's that great quote by Annabeth from the House of Hades. Some things aren't meant to be controlled because when you do, it corrupts you. You know, some things are too good to be true, which is the case for bloodbending. So I think VC did a really good job writing the first version of the story. Like I said, I did a lot of editing to it to make it flow a little better and stuff like that. And I hope the final product was something that you guys love. So yeah, guys, that'll do it for this video. I think it was a bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but hopefully you stuck around for the whole video. Or if you just went and read the short story on your own, that works too. One more time though, I gotta stress, if you're still watching this video, get in the comment section right now and let me know your thoughts on it, because at the end of the day, VC and I wrote this for you guys. If you guys like it, then it's good. If you don't like it, then it's probably bad, I guess. So get in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. Let us know your thoughts. I can't wait to hear them.